Activity number 1 asks us to measure a 1 molar hydrochloric acid solution in a test tube, 2 milliliters, and in 2 milliliters of a 1 molar sodium carbonate solution in another test tube, which we've already done here. And we've checked initial temperatures as well, so we'll go ahead and clean off our thermometer thoroughly in our waste container and place it to the side. And it then asks us to combine the hydrochloric solution into the sodium carbonate solution. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and it says to gently swirl and then measure any temperature, recording observations in temperatures. And we will let this sit for a minute. Oh, it looks like a carbonated beverage. It bubbled up for us. As you can see here, created some gas in there upon combination, and we'll go ahead and let that thermometer and solution sit for 1 minute, and then we'll record our observations and explain what we believe we saw. And that will conclude activity number 1. All right, activity 2 asks us to measure 10 milliliters of water in 1 test tube and to add 0.3 grams of a pre-weighted sodium polyacrylate in a second test tube, and to measure the temperature of the water, record, and to measure and to observe the color of each of these test tubes and record as well. And then we are to add the water of the water test tube into our solid powder solution. Okay, and so we do this gently swirling the mixture and insert the thermometer and record the temperature of the product and observe for 1 minute. So we will add this water into our solution, and it is white at the bottom. It looks like I should have swirled that as I went along, but you can see in the middle it's a clear solid, I think. And you can, so let's see what the temperature is. But it is a gellous substance, and we'll let that sit for a minute and we will observe our results, and that will conclude activity number 2. This is pretty wild. This is just so wild. And it's kind of a bouncy. I mean, not, it absorbs going down, and it's, you can feel that vibration as it, jiggle. So upon cleaning up activity 2, I had this cool ice cream spoon, and I am trying to pull out our gellous product, and it's pretty wild. It really is gel-like. Let's see if I can. Moldable, but gel. Interesting. Activity number 3. All right, we've already measured out our test tubes. Steps 1, 2, and 3, and 4 have been completed, as well as step 5 and 6. We are on to step 7, where it says to combine the contents of the 2 test tubes in one. So here we go. Gently swirl and mix and insert thermometer. Well, you can't swirl. Right. It is liquid surface, but has created some precipitate. All right, and you can see, you can bend this around and not much is moving in there. And so we are supposed to insert the thermometer and record a temperature. Okay. And it appears to be dropping, but we'll give that a moment. It says to observe for 1 minute and then record the final color and any additional observations. 4A says to observe a tea candle on a flat surface away from flammable materials and record the color of the tea candle, which is recorded in our data. And then we are to light the candle, which we have, and observe for 1 minute and record the final color and any additional observations. And step number 4 says, based only on your observations of the tea candle, indicate in the data table whether this was a chemical or physical change that has occurred and explain why. So we're going to give this a minute, then we'll make some observations and develop a conclusion. So activity 4B asks us to place a small ice cube in this aluminum weight dish and record our initial observations, and then asks us to place this over the flame for a minute and make some observations and record those as well. So I've already gone ahead and gotten this started, and what I found pretty interesting is that, of course, the ice cube melted thoroughly. Any small beads of water apart from the collection started to bubble. And then if I place this over the collective, depending on how close I am to the flame, the closer I get, the water actually begins to boil in this little weigh pan. And so if I pull it away, just water. Put it close, boiling water. Interesting. Okay, activity number 5 asks us to measure a gram of sugar, place it in a test tube, and measure 5 milliliters of water and place it in a separate test tube to make observations of color and temperature of water, and then to add water to the test tube containing sugar and gently swirl. Observe for a minute and record final color and temperature. So here we're gonna add the water and sugar, and we're gonna swirl. I'm not very good at this swirling. So as you can see now, there's still some granules down there at the bottom. We'll continue to mix this up. And then we'll observe after a minute and clean up, and that will complete activity 5. Activity 6, part A, we're asked to measure out 2 milliliters of a 1 molar solution of sodium hydroxide in a test tube, which we've done. We've recorded the color of the solution and the temperature of the solution. And it also asks to observe the phenolphthalein solution, 1% in 99% ethanol, and record the color of it. And since we've done that, we've recorded it, and then asks us to use a pipette, but this has a top on it. So we're just going to use the drop style bottle. And we will add 1 drop to our solution. There we go. And we can see that it has changed colors. I haven't mixed it yet. So it says to swirl around, and we see that that color is following that swirl and expanding. And then we'll just kind of shake it up right there. There we go. It also says to place the thermometer in and record a temperature. We will go ahead and do that, and then we will move on to part B. All right, to continue, we are looking at 6B, and we're asked to take our test tube from 6A, which you see here on that I'm moving here is this light pink. So with time, our test tube went from that bright neon pink to this light pink. And then we're asked for part B to measure a 1 molar solution of hydrochloric acid, 2 milliliters. And so that is this one right here, and it is clear. And so we're asked to combine these and make observations and measure any temperature changes. So we're going to go ahead and combine them here. And I don't realize how much a lab partner really helps, but goodness. All right, when you fly solo, here we go. All right, so we'll add this acid to here, and we saw a significant color change here. All right. All right, and we will check the temperature. Seems to have a little bit, let's see if I can show this in here. Oh, not really. There's a little bit of condensation on the inside of the tube there. And so let's check this temperature. And then we're gonna observe this for a minute and then record our results. Activity 7 is asking us to combine copper sulfate and sodium hydroxide. And we've measured out the 2 mLs of each solution and separated them into separate tubes. And as you can see, our copper sulfate has a blue color and our sodium hydroxide has a clear color. And we'll combine them and we will gently swirl and mix and observe. Whoa. That appears to be a nice, pretty solid there. Looks kind of gel-like. We've just got one little small layer of some extra. So we'll kind of mix this and see what happens. All right, mixing. It becomes a little bit more liquid, but a little thicker than just the two combined. All right, we'll go ahead and measure this temperature and observe for a minute and then clean up, and that'll conclude activity 7. Activity 8 asks us to prepare a blue and yellow water solution with food coloring to measure out 5 milliliters of each and place them in separate test tubes, and then asks us to observe, take the temperature of the two and then combine them and observe after a minute the temperature and color. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then we will observe for a minute, and that will conclude activity 8. Ooh, all right, that's, can't really see that, but that is a nice green if we remember art class in elementary school. So somewhat expected, but we'll go ahead and measure the temperature and observe for a minute. Asked you to measure 5 milliliters of hydrochloric acid in a test tube and to observe color and temperature, and then to cut a 0.5 centimeter length of a magnesium ribbon and to place it in the hydrochloric acid to swirl, mix, and then measure temperature and color over after a minute. And so we're gonna go ahead and add that here. All right, and here we go, adding. And then swirl. Gently swirl. All right, so we're gonna observe this over the next minute and record and clean up, and that will conclude activity 9. Exercise or activity 10, we're asked to take 5 milliliters of copper sulfate in 1 test tube and 2 grams of table salt or sodium chloride in the second to make observations of color and temperature, and then to add the copper sulfate to the salt, gently swirling, and then measuring temperature and color change after a minute. So we're going to go ahead and do that here. So, and then we swirl. If you see there seems to be a layer. We'll swirl. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and measure temperature over the next minute and record. All right. And then clean up. That'll conclude activity 10. Activity 11, we're asked to take our solution from activity 10, which is this pretty stellar looking combination right here, copper sulfate and aluminum, or sodium chloride. And then we're going to add aluminum pieces into this mixture and observe what happens, record temperature changes, and any observations that we note. So here we go. Little bubbles. The aluminum is turning black as if it's burning. I don't know if I can get a good, oh, there we go. Yeah, right there. See that. So we'll continue to observe that and record our temperature and observations, and that will conclude exercise 11. And for the grand finale, we have activity 12 that asks us to measure 5 milliliters of copper sulfate and to go ahead and sand our exterior of this iron nail. And we're going to record, we've recorded the colors of each. And we're going to place this nail in here for a minute. Oh boy, here we go. And after a minute, we'll remove it using our forceps. We'll measure temperature and any observations that we see. Did I? Oh, right there. Look at the color difference already in that nail. This is definitely changing this color. We have some activity. All right, we'll watch this and then we'll take our measurements, observations, and that will conclude activity 12.